Welcome to episode 5 of the Princeton Podcast with Mayor Mark Freda. In this episode, Mark sat down with Kristin Appelget, Director of Community and Regional Affairs at Princeton University. They discuss Kristin's background and career experiences, the wide variety of Kristin's lifelong community involvement, including how her tenure as president of the Princeton Chamber of Commerce and experiences with West Windsor's Town Council helped prepare her for her current position with Princeton University, as well as Kristin's thoughts on how our COVID pandemic is influencing Princeton's growing population, our local business resiliency, and the future of Princeton's Community Master Plan. So without any further introduction, let's join our host, Mark Freda, and his guest, Kristin Appelget, for episode 5 of the Princeton Podcast.
Kristin, thanks again for being here. And I think most people know that you work for Princeton University. One of the things I find confusing is when I talk to people, I get a different version of what your title is at the university every time I talk to people. What exactly is your title?
Well, Mark, it's funny you say that because given the spelling of my last name, I pretty much answer to anything. So it's funny to hear that the same applies to my title. So actually, the official title is I'm the Director of Community and Regional Affairs. I've been in the position now, frightening for me to think about it, but I've been there for 15 years. Time flies when you're having fun. And, you know, the position is one that's unique to Princeton. When you look at our peer institutions, the relationships with their community are organized in different ways. Our focus is with it being community and regional affairs, first and foremost, the community in which we reside, which of course is Princeton. So a lot of my time and a lot of my work is, as you know, spent participating in council meetings, planning board hearings, other civic organizations. I have a team of 4 others in my office. And we try and be visible and present and available to the constituents in the community who are interested in trying to find ways to connect with the university. And we know that people connect with the university in many different ways. So we're there to help facilitate those connections and to try and bridge, as I say to a lot of my colleagues, in many ways, we interpret the town for the university, and we interpret the university for the town. So I feel very much like maybe it's a overused term, but we're very much a bridge between both.
I see. And, I see you at a lot of meetings. I see you at a lot of events. So it seems to me that you're working days, nights, weekends. So how do you find time to do that? It seems like you're pretty much always working.
It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. I'd say the same for you, Mark, because I see you everywhere as well. I like to say it's a lifestyle position. It's a 24/7 job. And really, if I didn't love what I do in the place that I do it and for the institution that I work for, it's really not possible to do the work that I do. It really is all consuming, and you have to really be the type of person that embraces what I think is I look at it as a responsibility. And it's a responsibility both to the university as my employer, but also to the community. Because I think we can all, by working together, we can certainly be, 1 + 1 is definitely 2. So
right.
it's I take it seriously, and it is 24/7, 7 days a week sometimes.
So why don't you, just to help us understand, I know you deal with a lot of different groups and entities. So, but could you just, rattle off some of the wide variety of different groups and individuals you get involved with and trying to deal with them for the university?
Sure. So it's vast, and that's what's fun for myself and my staff. Every day is a little bit different. So a lot of my time, given the fact that the university is very much in the middle of an active capital campaign, and as many people know, if you drive around campus or if you walk on the campus, you can see that there's a lot of construction going on. So I've spent the better part of my time in the past, few years working very closely with our team and the planning officials here in Princeton, whether that's site plan review boards or planning boards. And that has been, a lot of work, and especially a lot of work during the pandemic. And I am incredibly thankful and appreciative to the staff here at the municipality who, through a pandemic, you figured out how to keep the operations of a government going without missing a step. I think that's benefited the town tremendously. So I compliment you and the staff, having, the ability to pivot to Zoom meetings for planning board. It's been interesting to watch, to see how, in some ways, community engagement has actually increased in some of those boards. There are, for some people, a meeting at 7:30 at night, when you have, others at home who you're responsible for, dinner, homework, whatnot, to be able to Zoom into a meeting. So, there's been some silver linings to the pandemic that I've noticed. In addition to that, we touch, Mark, probably pretty every, department in some way here in the building. So I can say, as someone who lives in town and as someone who works in town, we're really fortunate to have really great people here at the municipality that really care about their jobs. And then, outside of municipal government, it's working with lots of nonprofit organizations, spending time, with people at the organizations that are what make Princeton, right? The Arts Council of Princeton, Princeton Public Library, our tremendous public schools, organizations like Sustainable Princeton. Up until recently, I served on the board of the DNR Greenway. So, every day is a little bit different. And there's probably not too many organizations in town that I or my staff hadn't have some sort of, contact with.
Right. Which I think is a great thing. And it says a lot for the university as to how involved your office is and the university is in what goes on in the community.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's drop back a little bit now that we talked a little bit about what you're doing today. So I assume not everyone knows that you grew up locally, right?
I did. I grew up in West Windsor. And that was a time, growing up in the 70s and 80s in West Windsor, it was, people that remember West Windsor from that time, it was a bunch of farm fields, right? And it was a bunch of farm fields that were very quickly turning into developed areas. I had a lot of my friends who I grew up with whose, parents who located here because of proximity to New York and good public schools. I am actually, though, I think I am the fourth generation in my family to be in West Windsor. My father is a farmer. My grandfather and my father farmed together for many years in a farm that's located on Conover Road, which is near where the Mercer Oaks Golf Course is now, which many people are familiar with, the county golf course and the county park. So actually, I did grow up on a farm in the Garden State. But in addition to having, really being, from West Windsor, my mother was born and raised in Princeton on Little Brook. And my parents met at Princeton High School, because at that point, when my parents were going to school, my father, being from West Windsor, he went to Princeton High School. So, I had my grandparents who very much had Princeton ties. My mother, whenever we would do our shopping, we'd be coming to the I guess it was at that point, the Bambergers at the Princeton Shopping Center, Hewlett's on Nassau Street, Allen's on Nassau Street. I think I was probably related to all of them. But very much Princeton was our downtown, as I think it is even today for people in the region. So, it was an interesting time to grow up in the area. I think pretty much at least once a week in the summer, the only thing to do at that point when we were kids was go to Thomas Sweet, get ice cream, and sit by the fountain by what's now Spia. So, lots of really good memories of, coming into town.
Yeah. And I think it's a great thing for someone like you that's so involved in the community to have that history and the sense of what was and how we've evolved. So,
I agree. And my 103-year-old grandfather, Jack Honorai, who himself was born and raised in Princeton. We still have, we're very fortunate that he's with us. He actually still lives with my parents in West Windsor. So I get a lot of time to talk to him, and he's always interested to hear what's going on in town. One of my favorite stories is, he asked me one time what was what was going on. And of course, he still reads the town topics in the Princeton Packet. And I said, well, they're worried about traffic and parking on Nassau Street, Grandpa. He said, well, they've been worried about traffic and parking on Nassau Street since they started driving cars. And I think he probably was there about the time that they started driving cars on Nassau Street. So it's really fun for me to have that connection to the past and to still be able to talk to him about the town. And it's just a reinforcement that it's always been a great place to be. I feel very fortunate to be able to live here and work here.
Yeah, it's a special area. So after that early part of your life, where'd you go to college?
Oh, well, growing up in West Windsor, everyone says, oh, well, did you ever think of going to Princeton? And I said, I wasn't smart enough. I had a number of friends that did go to Princeton, Princeton University. But, I think being the daughter of a farmer, I'm actually in my father's family the first to go to college. And it was always very clear that my parents wanted us to go to college. And we were told that we could go no further than the Mississippi River. So I went about as close as I could get. So I went to Notre Dame, which is in South Bend, Indiana, not quite to the Mississippi River, but I got about 750 miles to the west. And I think at that point, certainly, having grown up and lived in the same place up until that point, I felt a need to go somewhere different. And walked on the campus on a college tour. It was the one school that my parents didn't visit with me. Huh. And after going to about 15 other schools that they did go to with me, I picked the one that they didn't go to. And it was the right pick for me, and a really great 4 years. But I was ready to come back to the East Coast after college.
So what did you do after college then? I mean, you came back and...
I graduated college in 1993, and it sounds like there's a fire engine going by. The first responders of Princeton. So 1993 was an interesting economic time. There were, problems in the stock market. The economy wasn't doing so well. And I had thought I was going to go to law school, realized in the middle of my senior year that I didn't necessarily want to go straight to law school. So I came back home and was just like every other college graduate looking for a job. I substitute taught in West Windsor Plainsboro schools just for a little while. And, this is where, it's all about, connections, right? So I ran into my French teacher from high school in McCaffrey's, and she asked me what I was doing and connected me with the friend of her daughter's friend. I ended up working for him for 10 years, and I was in the financial industry. So I ended up being a registered stockbroker for 10 years, and I was managing stock option pools for major companies. So don't know how that happened. I was a government and public policy major at Notre Dame, but ended up in a really great team with really smart people who to this day, I consider to be, really important mentors that I can look back at that time and say, there were sort of, things that I learned at that time in the financial industry that I still carry with myself today. So, ended up back in the area. My office was here in Princeton doing that work. I was there for 10 years. And then one day, out of the blue, I was at a Rotary Club luncheon, and someone mentioned that the longtime president of the Chamber of Commerce of Princeton was retiring. Now, I can tell you, Mark, I had never gone to a Chamber of Commerce lunch, but there was something about that comment. And I knew instantly that was what I was supposed to do next, out of the blue. Went up to the person who had mentioned it, who was David Holmes, who used to be at the head of Eden Institute, let him know I was interested. He was very surprised. Went through, the complete search with them, and I was ultimately hired about 6 months later. So I was complete 180 in my career at that point. But I was ready for a change. In the financial industry, it's about transactions, it's about money, and being the person that I am, I wanted something that was a little bit more tangible, a little bit more local. And it was the right right opportunity for me at just the right time. And really, I look back, I was really lucky that I went to my Rotary Club luncheon that Friday.
It was a good lunch. And the chamber at that point was on Van Deventer Avenue here in town, right?
No, actually, Mark, at that time, it was still in the Forestall Village in Plainsboro.
Oh, my.
So after a long history of being in town, the office got moved to Princeton Forestall Village in I think the 1980s. So this was in 2002. And I knew immediately that this was not the right location for the Chamber of Commerce to be in. And about 2 years later, we were able to acquire 911 Van Deventer and move the chamber office to that building. That was really exciting time for the chamber. I have to be honest, when I took over at the chamber, it was not in great shape. Membership was really low. Attendance at events was really low. But gosh, the Princeton business community, what better opportunity to take on? So really exciting time. We grew membership exponentially, became relevant again in terms of serving the members, speaking for business. And that was about the time when Barry Rabner had just come to town as the new CEO of the hospital. The hospital was starting to do their thinking about how they would reimagine. So, I've seen this really interesting, period of time here in Princeton of a lot of change. Maybe there's change in Princeton all the time, but I can point to that moment. I think of, the conversation about the hospital. The library was just getting under construction at that point. The new library, the Heinz Plaza. Things that we take for granted now here in Princeton. So, when you look back on that, this last 20 years, it's been a time of really tremendous growth in Princeton.
A lot of changes.
A lot of changes. Yeah.
So another aspect of your life, I believe you were an elected official.
I was. So I was never thought of being an elected official. I'm not someone that grew up thinking, gosh, I want to do that. But again, you grew up in town. Mark, I think my dad was the volunteer chief of one of the fire departments in West Windsor for 20 years. My mom was right there, volunteering and doing the same thing. My grandmother was the head of the Red Cross here, the executive director of the Red Cross here in Princeton until 1980. So, there's this, sort of, in addition to being a farm family and feeling very tied to the land, I think is one of the reasons, ultimately coming back to the East Coast, because you feel the need to be close to family, I think. There was also this just, pervasive sense in our family that there's, you need to be helping others, you need to be serving in the community. And my parents were doing that, all hours of the day as volunteer fire department members. So when I came back to the area, I sort of naturally, volunteered to be on the recreation commission in town. And I had been doing that for years. And the then mayor, Carol Carson, asked me, she said, gosh, Kristin, I really think you should run for office. You should run for council. I said, no way. And she kept asking me. And, finally I just got tired of her asking. I said, sure, I'll just do this. And ran a campaign. And, once you get in, you want to win. Yeah. And, 6 months later, I was elected. At that point, West Windsor was a nonpartisan election in May. So it was pretty quick. I decided, I think, in February to run, and the election was in May. So I didn't have a lot of time to think about it. Maybe I didn't have a lot of time to think and mess up. But being from town, I knew a lot of the issues that were going on. I don't know whether it was I got elected on my reputation or my parents' really good reputation at first, but it was a tremendous experience. So I was reelected after 4 years. So I didn't finish my second term because I was hired at Princeton in the third year of my second term. And I realized very quickly, without anyone asking, that because of the university being a major landholder in West Windsor, as it is in Princeton, that I could be put into situations where there would be a conflict of interest. Right. So I immediately, upon taking the position at Princeton, I resigned from my role in my being councilwoman in West Windsor. And I look back, if there's any disappointment, I maybe would have loved to have finished out that second term. But I felt like, did a lot of good work in the time I was there. I'm really proud of the fact that during my 7 years, the town acquired more than 1,000 acres of property through a variety of acquisitions, open space. So exciting to see the recent acquisition here in Princeton of the Landwin property, which is fantastic. And I know how hard that is to do, having been involved in those sort of negotiations. But it was really very fulfilling at that time to be able to, acquire a significant amount of land in West Windsor that would be preserved in perpetuity. So really proud of that.
It's amazing all you can do. While you were talking, I'm just kind of struck by there's very similar circumstances between your career and my career, in that when I got into politics, then Mayor Sigmund turned to me one day at a council meeting and said, "You come to all these meetings, why don't you run for council?" I hadn't really thought about it beforehand. So that was interesting.
It's very dangerous.
Yeah, very dangerous. So it goes to show
look
you
where you are now.
Yeah. So be careful if you go to too many public meetings. But I got to think that experience as an elected official helps you a lot in your current role. I mean, knowing what elected officials face and their challenges and how they think.
Absolutely. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the work that you and your colleagues do. It's hard. It's really hard work. And I know, and I think it's even harder today than it was 15 years ago when I was doing it, because the national discord, I guess we can say, there's this assumption that you're all in it for something.
Yeah.
You can't, people don't understand it. I think at the local level, people are here to serve. They're here to serve the community that they love, the community where they're raising their family. And, I just have a deep appreciation for the time and energy, the amount of, just the reading, right, that you all have to do beforehand. I just remember hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents. And when you want to do the job well, you've got to read it all and the meetings. So yeah, deep respect for the time and effort that goes into this, a deep appreciation for the need to, and maybe not even, but just the respect for the staff and the expertise that they bring. And I think even in the public forum, an appreciation for the fact that sometimes these are not easy decisions to make, and especially when there's a contested issue, that you have to, as an elected official, you have to take the best interest of the broad community into consideration, and it's not always easy because there's certain individuals or groups that feel a certain way. So yeah, it's a balancing act. And it's local, right? I mean, these are your neighbors sometimes that are not pleased with what's going on. So, and I think you're absolutely right to note. I think it does help me in my position, because I can interpret for colleagues who maybe have not been as involved in local government, why things have to take a certain process or, procedures that we need to go through. So, it's all part of that interpreting town to gown and gown to town.
Yeah. Well, I also think it's interesting. And I think it's a good experience being an elected official, because as you said, it's local level. You impact what happens to people, how they interact with you, whatever town you're in. But you really need to learn to listen to people, not jump to conclusions. We all have our own opinions, but you have to be open-minded enough to say, all right, let me get all the facts before I say, oh, this is what we should do. So it's a great learning experience.
Oh, absolutely. And your comment about listening is so accurate. You learn more with your mouth closed. And, listening is a real skill.
Yeah.
And like you said, not jumping to conclusions, getting all the facts, bringing people together, trying to find consensus. That's a real skill. And we need to see, we're fortunate here in Princeton that we see a lot of that. But I'd say just, when you look around the country, we need to see a lot more of it.
Yeah, we do. And it's I'm trying to remember where I heard this or read this, but I can't remember. I wish I could. But someone was pointing out the difference between listening to understand what someone's saying versus listening to try to debate with what they're saying, which gets into the whole thing about being open-minded and actively listening, hearing what's being said. And, in all that happens between the university and the town, knowing that most of the people involved get it and prescribe to, let's actually listen to each other,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll come to some kind of conclusion,
Right.
which is reassuring. I think everybody out there should know that, I mean, that's pretty much the basis for how the university and the town get along.
Absolutely. And I think there's so many ways where the university and the town intersect and interact at levels that you just don't even know. I mean, gosh, during snowstorms, right? I forget a couple years ago, it was one of the winters it was super snowy, and the town ran out of salt or sand or something. And, there's a relationship between our folks in facilities and your public works to say, gosh, our shipment isn't coming until tomorrow. Can we borrow some of your sand so that we can sand the roads? Well, of course we're going to say yes, right? Collaboration like that just takes place at the staff and professional level, collaboration and cooperation, it's really great to see.
Yeah, it is.
And unfortunately, it's not something that we all, talk about all the time. But it is part of what makes the town and the university, click so well. We got, a phone call, a local organization was trying to figure out what to do with their HVAC system. And they just need a little bit of advice. Well, we had some of the folks from our HVAC shop came over and, gave them a little bit of advice because the system that they had, which was aging, was similar to some of the aging systems that we have on campus. So, it's things like that where, you can provide expertise to each other.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, the amount of interaction between the town staff and the university staff, as you just said, that happens every day that people have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
About a month ago, our building official snuck me into a meeting he was having with a number of people from the university about a phase of the current project going on. All the work going on that the university has for a number of the new buildings, and to sit there and just be able to listen and watch them work with each other. No problem. Hey, I think this, you think that, what about this? Did you think about that? A great interaction, but just to see the quality of knowledge and experience, both on the university staff side, the town staff side, it's pretty impressive. And I don't know that people just realize the caliber of people that both the town have and the university have that deal with each other seamlessly every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day. I'm glad we're talking about it.
Yeah. There we go. People now know. There you go.
Yep.
Anyway, so let me just, you already talked a little bit about all the things that have happened over the last 20 years, different buildings, different projects in town. Where do you think you see things? Do you have an idea what else is coming down the road, or what you think might be happening?
Gosh, it's really an exciting time. Of course, I have to say maybe it's obvious, but COVID, we're just coming out of, something I've never experienced in my lifetime. I don't think any of us have. And I think, the changes coming, I think, will all stem from the experience that we just had for 2 years. And I think, it's frightening a little bit, but it's also really exciting. I think, some of the changes that are going on in our central business district are critical to having a really vibrant bricks and mortar retail, area in the community, one that we all love, right? That we think is really important to be there. And a reason that the university during the pandemic set up a small business resiliency fund, because we realized, gosh, these are the shops that we walk to get a sandwich, to get a greeting card. Unfortunately, most of us were not on campus during the last 18 months. And we wanted those, retailers to be there when we came back, because I think many people in the community do. So I think this is a really interesting time of change and evolution for the business owners, and, the type of services that they provide, how they provide that. So I think that's going to be really interesting. And I think, I know you and the council are paying a lot of attention to that, and I appreciate that. And I know the university's, here to be supportive. I think the fact that there's going to be a lot more people living in Princeton, that will be a big change. In the area of town that I live in off of Terhune, I basically look out my front door and I can see where the Avalon project on Thanet will be located. And okay, frankly, I'm excited to have some new neighbors. I think the transformation at the shopping center, to me, that's really very exciting to take advantage of. I love the shopping center. I love being able to walk there and get a coffee at Lily Pies and see people on the weekend. The great programming that they're doing. So I think that's a really interesting big change in the community. It's the fact that we're going to have more housing in different locations. So I think to me those are the near term opportunities, I guess, for the community to take advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, change is going to keep coming, and I think to look at change as an opportunity is a good thing. And on the bright side, it's a community that pays attention to what's going on, and you can't ignore change. You don't want to hide behind the rock and let it go right on by you. So the fact that we're all involved, and I know that the university is always eager to work with the town, and the town is very eager to always work with the university. So I think that serves everybody well in this area that we're going to.
I do too. I think I'm excited about the upcoming master plan process that the community is going to embark on. I think it's a really interesting time to be doing that work, and a lot of questions to ask ourselves about what do we want to be when we grow up, right? And that if I learned anything, and I learned a few things as an elected official, there's two documents that you really look at. You look at the budget of the community, because the budget tells you what the community values. The budget is you putting your money where your mouth is. So if you want to understand the values of a community, you look at their budget. And the second thing you look at is the master plan. How does the town intend to grow? So I'm really excited that, obviously the budget's worked on every year. I think it's a really interesting time to look at the master plan through that lens of, what does the master plan say about the community now and what the community wants to be? So I know that's another one of those meetings I'll be attending, Mark.
Yeah.
Master plan meetings.
Many, not just one.
Not just one. That's
well, anyway,
sure.
Kristin, I want to thank you very much for spending time with us today. Always great to talk to you.
Mark, thank you. I really appreciate being asked to be here with you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for our 5th episode of the Princeton Podcast. Special thanks to our podcast guest, Kristin Appelget, and our host, Mayor Mark Freda. The Princeton Podcast is recorded and produced by HG Media, providing audio, video, and website design services here in Princeton since 1999. If you enjoyed this episode of the Princeton Podcast, please share it with your friends, and be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.